All right, we're rolling. I'll talk about something that's different between now and then when it comes to the whole van lifing back up where I'm from. When I got into the whole van life thing, there wasn't even a really name for it. You were just somebody living in a van. It was like I got back from Rocky Mountain State. I couldn't really find decent employment over there. I still thought construction was the way. And so I moved back, and I'm thinking I'll do construction. I always wanted to do trucking, by the way. You know why I didn't do trucking initially? I had a lot of old people telling me that trucking, it'll be miserable, you'll hate it, truckers don't make money. Couldn't be further from the fucking truth, to be honest with you. Once you get established at a good company, you make money hand over fist. Now, a lot of guys say, well, I make this much. Yeah, but you also have to commute to work. Take out that money. You also got to pay that rent or that mortgage, assuming you haven't paid off your house. You also got to pay all those utilities. Truckers don't got to pay none of that. So it's kind of like van life in the sense that you avoid a lot of the basic problems, you know? And back when I was moving garbage for a living, I didn't get the garbage initially. Initially, I showed back up here, and it's what I refer to as the dark ages. That first year I bought the house, and that first year I was back over here. Like, I don't know if it was a year or 6 months, however long it was. I was over here. Yeah, I got back over here in like the fall. It was October. Had to give away my husky that really broke me inside. And it was like next summer, 2007. I think I got back here 2007. So did I get employed at the garbage company 2008 maybe? I don't remember exactly. But yeah, I didn't initially think I was going to go back to van life wasn't in the cards. It wasn't. What happened was I moved back, and the guy I was renting the land from, because he was a dick. Yeah, I like the guy, don't get me wrong, but he upped my rent by $50. And I was driving that S10 Blazer, and it got okay mileage for a Blazer, but I wasn't getting good enough mileage working at Slaver Ready. Working whatever temp job I could get to actually make enough money to pay my mortgage on the other state. And they're like, well, did you rent out the place? When I was over there, I had these problems of like, I'd have all these crackerjack motherfuckers show up. And they'd be like, well, one guy was like, I'll pay you $300 a month for this. And I'm like, well, fuck that, because that's $150 less than my mortgage. He's like, well, I don't think you're going to rent it for $400 or $500. I'm like, well, I don't fucking care. I'm not going to rent it for cheaper than I'm paying. Because, you get someone living in a house. And the other reason I didn't rent it out back then was basically the house had old wiring. And we're talking like 2-wire in some parts of the house. It was like a house built in the 1920s. So the front end of the house had some old janky wiring here and there. And my thought was, I don't want someone to accidentally burn down this house because they plug in some stupid shit, thinking, oh yeah, this is modern wiring. So the house was empty for years. But it was a struggle to make that like $442 a month. And that was the beginning payments. And so after I gave away my husky, I was like, that's part of the reason it took me so long before I got another dog. Because I was like, I'm not getting another dog until I have the situation where nobody can touch me. And it was like, I ended up working Slaver Ready for a while. And I ended up living in my S10 Blazer because I was like, I found that I took out the passenger seat. And that allowed me to build a bed all the way back. I put my tools in the wheel well of the passenger side, and I made a bed all the way back, and I made a little wooden shelf where I could put a TV and a PlayStation up there. And then people were like, PlayStation? Yeah, I mean, I had an old school PlayStation, the original, and I had some old games. So every once in a while I'd get out my generator. I had a little rack on the back of my van. All right, at that point it wasn't a van, it was an S10 Blazer. And I had a little generator in there. And so basically, I sometimes I'd camp somewhere middle of nowhere, get some extra gas. And it always seemed like I felt like I was wasting money spending gas to play video games. In the long run, I look at it and I'm like, well, how much would you have spent at the bar or a restaurant or doing something else? And it was like, I came to this number where it's like, well, I'm just saving money by basically playing video games in the middle of nowhere. And now it's even better. Now we got like the DS is old, but Nintendo Switch and all that. And you can run those off of cigarette lighters. You can you could recharge that off of like the most barest solar system. Yeah, that was back when smartphones really weren't a thing. I mean, I didn't have a smartphone for a while there. And you remember when they had the keyboards and it was the cord, it was actually a little keyboard on your smartphone? Yeah, way back then. But I ended up eventually, after Slaver Ready wasn't really working out, I ended up getting this job working at DM Disposal. This is ages ago. I was Route 45. And I was like a month behind on my house payment when I took that job. And I was just like, I remember I went down to the unemployment office to try to find anything. And what was funny about it was when I went to the unemployment office, they said, "Oh, it's through Labor Ready." And I was astonished and pissed at the same time because I told the people at Labor Ready that I had a Class B CDL. I didn't have a Class A back then. I had a Class B. I should have got my Class A if I'd known the rhythm of how to double clutch. And everything was double clutch. The guy was training me had a 13-speed dump truck. And the guy, by the way, he was the guy and his buddy who ran the landscaping business he had. The guy that was the buddy, he's like, "Oh, you shouldn't have him drive that dump truck. You could damage that dump truck training him and that." That guy was a fucking failure as a trucker, by the way. Fucking failure. And by the way, most of the guys that tell you that OTR trucking is bad were the failures. I'm just going to be real about that. I can't remember what his fucking name was, but fuck that guy. Because it was guys like that told me, "You ain't going to make no money out there in trucking. You ain't going to make." Yeah, it's like guys like that. It's like, no, you didn't make any money, but that's not true. You bought a truck, you made money, but then you went home and wanted to be king shit. That's exactly the same story of why most guys I knew that made real money were broke all the fucking time. They all wanted to be the show off. They wanted the cars, the clothes, the crap, the stuff. Mama wants your SUV, all that shit. So they go and buy a lifestyle they can't afford. Then they go out to trucking thinking trucking's going to save them. Then they go out and lease a truck thinking, if I lease a truck, I'll make more money. But they don't know their ass from a hole in the wall as far as running a business. They don't know how to claim taxes. They don't know when to do shit. And then when everything goes tits up, belly up, they go foreclosure on shit. Their old lady leaves them. And next thing you know, they're the guy saying, trucking's bad. Trucking fucking sucks. Trucking's this. Trucking's... Fuck you, all you loser motherfuckers who failed. Fuck you. Though these young kids out there, just like with plumbing, just like with electricians work, they need the guys like myself who actually made money doing it. The reason I made money as a trucker was because I wasn't buying. Look at this van. Does it look like I'm spending money on? Does this look like a Sprinter van? Fuck no, it doesn't. I bought this van for $700 and it's been treating me well for years. Why the hell would I get rid of it? Why would I buy a brand new vehicle when my vehicle is just going to rot away in the sun at the terminal? Like, what the fuck? Why would I buy an overpriced house? I might buy some land in a nice climate and then maybe drop a factory yurt there or just an RV. But I'm not going to go out and build some like $500,000 to $2 million home because mama wants to show off to her girlfriend. Blah, 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 blah. Mama can bring her own fucking job and start paying her bills. She wants that shit. I tell you these things because this is how you actually, if you want to make money, you need to learn to be a minimalist. You need to learn to do that shit. Because when you can live off $200 to $300 a month and you're making $80K a year, you got to start finding ways to claim your taxes better and better. That's part of the reason I moved back to Washington State. We have no state income tax and there's free food on the beach, free food in the hills. I can grow everything but citrus here. That's why I bought those 2 lots down there. Plus, there's good TV. I pick up all the stations at that particular property. But what I'm getting at with this is that the failures back then, they were the ones telling me I couldn't make it. And yeah, I grew up in a broke-ass fucking logging town. After the logging crash, it became, there might have been jobs back in the day for a lot of young men, but there weren't jobs where I came from when I was a kid. The reason I cleaned that meat plant for as long as I did is because I didn't think there was anything better. Kind of like, like you see these women that were abused, and why were they in the bad relationship? Because they didn't think there was going to be anything better. Same thing with jobs. And so when I got out there, after I gave away my Husky, I was out, working slaver ready, working wherever. My hometown, I couldn't find a job. Okay, let me tell you another part of the story. Later, after the first stage of progress, I was helping take care of that ranch. That year and a half I was on unemployment. I applied at every fucking place, every decent job I could. And they're like, no. Some of them would look at shit like it would be a mover job. I had Class B CDL. They ran Class B trucks. And I was a big hulking man. I could be a mover. And this guy was like, well, you didn't finish high school. Who fucking cares? I got the driving skills, a clean record, and, this and that. I don't smoke pot because I wanted to get a job. It's like, and then it was always the nepotism. They'd always hire their fucking own, man. And I get that. They're your family, blah, 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 and they're fuck ups. And then they end up causing a problem. And it's like, oh, there's another L&I claim for your dumb ass. But you hired your fucking junky fucking relatives. I know one guy I worked with. He was a meth head. This is back when I worked at the meat plant. And he would be on and off unemployment because his mom worked at the unemployment office. So he'd work for a while. Then, oops, I had an accident. I slipped at work. Oh, my back. Fucking total scam artist. Total. And it's like, sometimes I look back and think, growing up where I grew up, and people talk about this in the ghetto as well, when it's really hard to get ahead as a legitimate man, you start to understand why people go out and they start running a scam, a game, or something. You start to understand that. Because you look at it and go, if I'm trying to do it the right way and all I'm doing is getting shit on, but my buddies who went out there and said, wagga-woo, that's crazy. This is back before crazy checks and everybody was on fentanyl and shit. I mean, sure, we had meth heads back in the day and some people that were heroin addicts. And, of course, there's always the old stoner smokies out there. Your people that are like smoked meat. Fucking old guys listen to the classic rock stations. Fucking, since the 60s, 70s, 80s, they've been smoking a joint. Old stoner smokies. We've always had that. But when it becomes easier to just be like, wow, woo, I'm crazy and get a check from the government that is to get a job, you start to understand why people pull a scam. You start to understand why in some cities, people were drug dealers. If the guy getting, the better pussy, the better life, the better everything is the guy running the hustle, the game. What are you going to tell that young man? Okay, Mr. Doing it right, doing the right thing gets the wrong results. And that's what I grew up in. There's no bullshit about this. That's what I grew up in. Broke ass logging country. So when these people sit there and talk about white privilege, I mean, I always go with that. It ain't a joke when I say this, but it's kind of funny. This woman I was at this truck stop in Belgrade, Montana years ago. That truck stop shut down. I was there about a month ago. I was like, oh shit, the old Flying J there shut down. And she's like, you don't understand. You have white male privilege. And I looked at her, and she and the Latino trucker we were talking. Hey, what's up? And she's like, white male privilege. And I'm like, yeah, why don't you tell me more about my white male privilege as I was foraging for food from the Domino's dumpster. Quite literally, foraging for food from the Domino's dumpster. No joke. Because that's what we were doing back in the day. The guy that taught me to dumpster dive was from my hometown. And I haven't dumpster dived in years because I'm going to be real about it. We've got such good food banks in America these days that there's just no reason to. There really is. There's no reason to dumpster dive. Like some of these food banks, it used to be once a month. And it was like, if you want to do Celebrity Chef, Celebrity Chef Food Bank Edition. Okay, here's a bag of random about to go bad vegetables and questionable meat from the food bank. Here's some cow tongue. And why did by the way, go to a Walmart and look at the price of a cow tongue. Hey, what's up? Go to a Walmart and just check out a cow tongue sometime. It is expensive meat, but white people don't eat cow tongue. White people don't eat it. They look at cow tongue and they're like, oh, that's gross. I look at cow tongue and I'm like, okay, you put that cow tongue with some spices in a crock pot. You let it cook all day, and then when it gets end of the day, you peel off that meat. Take the cow tongue out, and the broth left over, you can work with that too. You can make a good soup stock out of that. You might have to add some bouillon cubes, but it's real good. You want to cook other things like noodles, rice, or whatnot with that. So I got used to like the weird meat. And it's funny when I look at it, and I tell people, I'm like, yeah, people talk about poverty. Economic poverty where I'm from is an issue, and it's always been an issue. So we go back to the whole original of this conversation about van life. And it wasn't called van life back in, I mean, maybe the blossomings of van life were somewhere out there, but it didn't become a culture. This is before YouTube was a thing. We're talking, well, it was around, YouTube was around, but we're talking, I think it was 06. Yeah, I got back here in 06. In 07, I got that garbage job. I was a garbage truck driver. And so back then, we were still, the peninsula was still going through the recession like a motherfucker. In fact, the recession hit us 6 months to a year before it hit everywhere else. It always does. We've got double the unemployment. I don't know if it's still that bad, but double what the national unemployment is. And that's the environment I grew up in. So you start to think about it. Now this is a van. Anyhow, yeah, if I was in a truck, man, way taller, looks better. But like, I'll tell you what, when I look back at it, there were lots of spots all over the place. And now I go to a lot of those places, and they were starting when I left back 12 years ago to put ecology blocks. Those giant blocks they just put in the way, or like those barriers. They put the ecology blocks because they're like $25 a piece. And then the people that like, and here's the problem. You get the van lifers, and fuck that. They're not van lifers. They're homeless people that can't afford rent, or they don't want to pay rent, and they got an RV. The winters here will not kill you. They won't. If you're smart and you got decent bags, the winters here might be a little chilly in December and January. Also February and November, it's chilly. But I mean, fuck, I know guys that had like wood stoves in their RVs or trailers. So yeah, you'd be absolutely fine up here. So what people would do is they'd build their RV, and then they just kind of park somewhere until they got kicked out. And then they kind of park somewhere else. And the problem is you'd have these issues because the problem with a lot of these, they're not van lifers. They're just junkies and bums in vehicles. What happens is that they're house people. They are not meant to be on the streets. Oh, they'll adapt to the streets, but they'll adapt it in the house way. Like, well, what do you mean in the house way? The house way is like you have a bunch of shit and they don't want to pay for a storage unit. Well, that could be gas and insurance. And I get that. You know, you could spend that $40 a month you could get rid of most of the shit you don't need. You don't need your old shitty couch. You know, they probably get rid of they leave that shit at the rental. They leave all that stuff, but they got a bunch of crap. And they'll have like a car full of crap. They'll have an RV full of crap. And they'll have another vehicle, like they'll have the junky vehicle, and then they'll have like the girlfriend's shitty little vehicle car, and they're both fucking stoner smokies, or just frankly Junkytown Jerry's. And them Junkytown Jerry's, they'll park on the street somewhere. Like it used to be, you see this in the city still to this day, the industrial zones, the warehouse districts. As a trucker, you see it all the time. It's like, I don't even flinch. It's just like, that's just some Junkytown Jerry living there. If they start doing some weird shit, we got to call the cops. If it gets a little aggressive, pow pow, motherfucker. I know that kung fu, that chink chink pow pow, motherfucker. You know, I ain't dying over some fucking shit. I ain't got to go out there and encounter them if I don't have to. But I'll tell you what, 99.9% of the time, your RV industrial zone people, they just kind of keep to themselves. They don't bug nobody. but they're a mess and they look bad. So when you don't have a big industrial zone, these people can kind of move around in, like move their RV like once a week, or in my case, I moved every night. I would change my spot every night. You know why I did that? Because then the junkies don't know where the fuck you are. Even back when I was doing the garbage job for a living and living in my S10 at first, then my half-ton Chevy, the proto van, and then eventually I upgraded to the battle van, and then I got this one, the party van. When I was, and I also used to have an S10 blade, or not S10, but 93 Escort. And I'd use the Escort to go long distances and the party van to go up into the hills and the battle van during the winter, because it's like the battle van's an apartment on wheels. I still have the battle van. It's over in another state. But when it comes down to like the whole situation, there were lots of park spots. There were lots of places you could just go. And the problem is it's not van lifers. Now, some van lifers are trashy. I won't lie. You get people to just throw their garbage. They take a piss outside. They leave their toilet paper everywhere. You know, they don't understand the idea of a bidet, a backwoods bidet. And, you know, you get to cut off pieces of sock or cloth, put them in the bleach, like a big old jar, bleach water. And people are like, yeah, that looks great. Like, it's not that hard to dig a cat hole, people. You know, it's just not that hard. And so what ends up happening is that people see the garbage, the shit, or just fucking junkies doing junky shit. And they start putting ecology blocks places. It becomes a thing where the people in the county, the city area, are like, they're just trying to manage this fucking problem. When really the real problem is these junkies, as I've said in previous recordings, these junkies used to be employed at some mill, some factory, some warehouse, some something. They used to do something. And now either they're getting a crazy check and not working, or, you know, there's foreigners that show up, not high, not a potential liability. And these illegals work for fucking piss ass wages. Wages you couldn't afford to live on. And by the way, a lot of them illegals, I don't give a shit what people tell me. They get with some girlfriend who has Section 8, and then they live on Section 8. You know, she's like, I don't know who the daddy is. You know, and then he's working under the table making real money, and paying no taxes. Oh, okay, he pays gas taxes and sales taxes. So then you got your old Junkie Town Jerry's, your Smoke Stoney's Junkie Town Jerry's, and they got to pay real taxes. If they can manage to find an under the table gig like the Mexican does, then that's one thing. For the most part, they got to pay real taxes and pay real ass rent, unless they manage to find some girlfriend who's on Section 8 and pull the same scam. But that scam gets harder and harder for a lot of those people to pull. So eventually they're out on the streets. And then the places I knew where I would go to these places and I could easily park there. Now, a lot of them, if they don't have ecology blocks, they have the sign that says no overnight parking. Now, I guess, I mean, if you were going to be a nighttime security guy or you work the night shift, that'd be fucking cherry, dude. You know, you get off work about 5 in the morning and you go there right as the sun comes up. You take your sleep in your van. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon when you wake up. You go to the gym, go catch a shower, and you just give the middle finger to society. You're like, oh, can't be there after dark. Not a problem, you know? Like down there at the Boat Haven. By the way, the guy, the security guy there, he's cool. He's a good conversation. Like, if you're, you know, he has to manage a bunch of fucking retarded fucking junkies and stoners. You know, that's what he has to do all the goddamn time. I understand why the police and the fucking security people are pissed. Like, I'm a nomadic bum when I travel. If I'm not driving a truck, then I'm a bum. You know, and maybe I'll take up a job. If someone offers me a job, and the rule is, hey, if I'm going to work for you, you got to have a cool place to keep my corgi during the day. You can keep them around, like if it's a resort, you can have them around as a mascot or something. People love this dog. But it's one of those gigs where, and also I don't mind working, but I'm not going to work for, you know, piss dickly wages that aren't worth. You know, I like, okay, if I'm making more than enough to get by for the year, like if I work and make like $10,000, that's one thing. But like if I could drive a truck and make 80 to 100K a year, even 70 on the low end. Like for let's say when I get back to the industry and I'm working for some rinky dink company, I'm making 70, but I'm living off 5,000 a year. You know, house is rented out to some good Mormon family over there. I'm not even, it's paying for itself, so I don't have to deal with shit. But it's one of those gigs where when I look at it, I do get why the problem is the way it is. Because some of these people show up. And by the way, you'll see cases where some shit happens, their RV breaks down, and then they're just there until they get kicked out of there. And then when they get kicked out or figure out some new shit, they ditch the RV in the woods. The RV has a problem on the side of the road, and they don't got the money to fix it, and it stays there until the cops eventually put a tag on it, and it gets dragged off to some place to be shredded up, ground up, turned, there. And you never know what you're gonna when you get some of those people like, hey, you're a bunch of junkies in an RV, man. That's got to be put on your hazmat suits and look out for pokies. I don't envy the situation that the local townspeople and the police are in. I don't. And the thing of it is I'm kind of like a traveling bum, like, a traveling hobo. That's what it is. I move around and I'll bum an area. I'll work the food banks. And then sometimes when I leave town, that's when I'll bum. So I'll work the town. I'll see what's going on. I'll see, if there's anything cool going on festival wise, or, where's the laundromats? Where's okay to park? And it's getting thinner and thinner out there. And that's part of the reason I tell people being a nomadic bum is actually way better. But when you look back at just how many spots there were way back in the day, I think about power line roads out there near Disco Bay, the park spot that used to be timber, but after they cut it, they put a cable up. The place over there by the entrance to the national park where you could park. And I remember I parked right against those ecology blocks, and then the ranger would show up. You can't sleep here. Why? I'm in the city. Because you can't be here. All right. Well, in the morning I'll take off. Okay. I don't want to catch you here again. Who the fuck am I hurting parking there? I'm not leaving any garbage. In fact, back then I was a garbage man. If I saw garbage, I'd pick it up and put it in a bag. And either I take it to my garbage truck for Monday morning route, or if it was in my route, I would just drive by and grab the garbage quietly. Just like, hey man, I got a free garbage service. I didn't have any place to have a garbage can, so fuck it. There's my garbage can. I just clean up wherever. I was a positive bum. Back then, I wasn't even bumming change either. I could tell you about when the peninsula really started changing. We always had a few home bums. We always had some of the guys that I remember from high school that were drug addicts and fuck-ups, that were kind of drunks and brawlers or had issues. Obviously, they had kids, illegitimate children. And they were always kind of a managed issue. But it was like the proto-bum. Like, the first carrier bum. I don't know if I can explain it. This guy showed up. Little bald guy, beady eyes, little glasses. And he used to have a sign that said, hungry. That's all it said. And it was kind of a joke. Like, hey, did you see hungry? You're like, who? What? Oh, it's this bum. And all he does is hold a sign that says hungry. And so he would get money. And eventually Hungry got given a pickup truck by somebody. So Hungry built a little homeless camp on his pickup truck, like a little house on the prairie. Like he had a, what do you call it? Wood racks on it with a little kind of pipe deal set up there to where he basically had a makeshift homemade canopy. And so, it was like a homeless version of Little House. Just cue in the music for Little House on the Prairie. And then Hungry would show up all over the peninsula. You just randomly, he'd be, before he had his little camp he would just probably catch mass transit. And you would see him like over in Port Angeles. You see him in Squim. You see him in Port Townsend. You see him down in Quilcene. One time I saw him down in Brennan. Like, Hungry got around, you know? And he was the beginning of what would be considered your trashy city bums showing up. We always had a few crazies. We always had a few home bums. But that was about the real beginning of when the Seattle invasion, the Puget Sound pollution started showing up out on the peninsula. And I look back at it, and it's just like, it was really cool before then. People weren't so uptight. Yeah, we had that problem back in 2007. You know, the whole recession thing. We had that problem back then. But, by the way, the cops weren't cool with you sleeping on the streets before that. And they weren't cool with it. They're not cool with it ever, but like they were more tolerant of it because they understood a lot of these people just don't have jobs. They don't have a place to go. And they've lived in this town their whole life. So and part of it was the cops were getting tired of having to run off locals. And as long as those people weren't causing any problems and they moved around consistently, they didn't stick around too long. The cops they were like, yeah, just as long as you don't camp in one place too long. They became like, they became kind of tolerated. But that's eventually when the crazy checks, people started getting the crazy checks. That's when things started really fucking changing. Because the crazy checks basically ended up, these people would get like a crappy Cousin Evan, remember National Lampoon's Cousin Eddie, one of them Cousin Eddie RVs. And then it started becoming more normal and normal. The people that used to rent a shitty little trailer, single wide metal meth mansion, then or like a crappy little bungalow apartment. Those people were now on the streets, and they were everywhere. And now they're junky problems that used to be contained in a single wide metal meth mansion. And also, those same people, like back in the day, you'd have a case where someone rents out like a trailer, one of them single wides in the county, but then they'd have their friends in their RVs next to the trailer. Once they all figured out, they're like, wait, we could just get an RV and fucking sleep on the streets. And once people stopped caring, because what happens is that at first everybody's like, ooh, that's kind of greasy, that's weird. And then you got a few friends that are forced into it. And then basically they look around and are like, well, hey, it's not so bad. Dude bro's living okay. He's got all the beer money and money for weed that you could ever imagine. Well, that was a big something. Somebody delivering toters. But once it becomes kind of like it's just the same thing that actually happened back in the day after the logging crash, where at first, if you were on unemployment, it was shameful. People looked at you like you were a fucking failure. But eventually, enough people were unemployed after you could lose a whole logging mill. And there was a pride thing for people having jobs around here back in the day. That pride kept people going. And then once enough people lost jobs at mills, the logging crash happened. Then it became kind of socially a little more normalized. It wasn't tall, it wasn't accepted because you had that older mentality. But it became kind of normalized, and then people started being more accepting of people on unemployment. They're on a downturn. Well, then some of them would get a job. Some of them would be they'd adapt to the system. Some of them would move away to better, greener pastures, which was probably the smartest thing you could have done. But if you got a house and whatnot, and once somebody loses the house and the divorce happens, then once some of them got on Section 8, they just never fucking left. They got on Section 8 and they're like, hey, they think to themselves, they did the right thing. They worked, they did everything, and society failed them. And they're like, fuck it. And then that's when you get a generation or so on unemployment, Section 8. And then it just becomes, how do I continue to run that scam? And that led to what we saw with all the people during the recession, where that was kind of, the beginning was like hungry. I remember that clear day, but that recession was set the fertile grounds for what we're seeing today. And then slowly but surely, as more people were living in vans because either desperation across the country or just kids that were like, fuck it, I don't, they get out of high school, they get out of college and they want to have some fun. You know, back then you could pick up a van relatively affordable. It wasn't like getting a van was like some expense. You could pick up, I got this van back in like '08, '09, something like that for $700. The fact that I'm still driving it is because I never really put a lot of miles on it when I was driving truck. I mean, shit. There was one year I only put like 500 miles on my van, if that, because I was over working in that trucking company, and I just get back and I go into town every week or two and go get some, you know, get the food, do the laundry, maybe hit up that all you can eat pizza buffet over by the post office, check my mail. And then by the time I was done doing what I needed to do, catch a night's rest, and then they already had a load ready for me to go. And I'd just be back on the road, man. So I didn't put a lot of miles on this. But yeah, the world changed. And as the more they weren't van lifers. They weren't people that were like, you know, hey, like I'm more of a slow casual van lifer. I'll go up into the hills and I'll camp somewhere for a couple weeks. Leave no trace. You know? Cause no problems, leave no trace. Now it was the old stoner smokies, the bums, the derelicts, that when they couldn't afford rent, they didn't become van lifers. They became someone that was used to living in a house. So they were trashy fucks. That were trashy fucks in a house that then became trashy fucks in an RV on your streets. And that's really what changed it. And I'm not sure if that's the same story for the whole country, but I can tell you, as I've traveled and I look at all the cool little spots that I used to park that are now, you can't access them. You can't access those spots. When I look at all the cool little spots you can't access anymore, or they got those damnable signs up. Yeah, it just occurs to me that I'm like, that's what killed it. And so now you got to go way up into the hills. A lot of the DNR land, a lot of the BLM land, you can't camp like you used to camp. It's day use only. Everywhere that's remotely on the outskirts that's close is basically, it's almost all gone. So now you end up having to park in riskier and riskier places. Like last night, that fucking weird fucking minivan. And then the cops showed up. Man, you know, the cops kind of scared off. I didn't call the cops. The cops just kind of, I think the cops were staking out over there, to be honest. But, yeah, who knows? Well, it was funny because the minivan showed up and it had that signature fucking meth head sound, you know, like a muffler that's never been changed or doesn't exist. That sound. And then it wasn't even like 2 minutes after that dude showed up, a cop goes by and shines the light. So I think he was staked out over there at that kind of area over on yonder. I think he kind of thought, yeah, okay, we're going to have some methods here. And then later, about midnight, there was some group let some guy off on a bike and he went riding somewhere. And there was a, what do you call it? These two guys with their headlamps are out there in the weeds, in the grass, looking for something. I'm like, what the fuck are these two losers looking for? You know, are they hunting for some sort of bait? Are they looking for a cell phone or some drugs they had to toss? You know, what the fuck are they looking for? A used needle? I don't fucking know what these idiots are doing. But, yeah, I'm telling you, man. Yeah. It really, a lot of it's economic, a lot of it's immigration, a lot of it's just fucking broken culture, you know? And it's a tale of two cities. There's this group of people and there's that group of people, you know? Haves and the have-nots. And then there's the people that, you know, when you say the have-nots, let's be honest, a lot of them are just fucking lazy bums. They're lazy people. They don't try. Or they tried really hard back in the day, a divorce and the situation crushes them. And they decide, well, fuck it. Why bother? Why bother any more than I have to? And I kind of get that. But I don't know, man. Like, you could strategically van life a whole lot easier as a nomadic bum. You could go to places and show up right after dark. I called it the sundown plan. And that's why I liked winter better than summer. Because darkness came earlier in the day. You get off work at, 5 o'clock, 4 or 5 o'clock, somewhere in that range. And then basically you'd be down there at the pay showers down at the marina, go over to the grocery store, grab some food, go park somewhere right as the sun's setting, and then basically get up before the sun rises, go back to your job, leave no trace, no trash, no drama. And then every night you just change spots. That's what I did in Port Townsend. I just changed spots every night, man. Well, there were a few times I might have been hassled by people, but once with the cops around there, once they knew I worked for the garbage company, once they understood that I had a steady job, they're like, "Oh yeah, he's not a problem. He works a job. He just doesn't want to pay rent or utilities. He's weird, but he's not a problem." But even back then, you started seeing more van lifers, more bums. I should say a lot of these guys were bums. And then somewhere along the lines, once that became normalized enough, you started seeing van life become a trend. And you got to remember, this is way back then. YouTube was it was old YouTube. So we're talking back when Bitcoin first came out. It's when I was doing all this. So it's a long time ago. That's back in the first age of progress. I look back at that, and that's to tell you the truth, when I look at it, I bought that house in the Rocky Mountain State. Come December, it'll be 20 years ago. So we're talking a whole other era of my life. And if I could go back and change a few things about my life, just a few things, I never would have bought that house. I never would have bought the piece of land over there and that other piece of land I got over there near the river. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying, I just would have bought some raw land over on the Hoods Canal back when it was dirt cheap. I would have worked a job. I would have been a trucker as young as possible. I would have went over there and bought some raw land there and some dirt cheap land in the wasteland out there in Nevada. That's what I would have done. And then I would have had a situation where I could show up with a van or an RV, and then I could just be this place for this many months of the year, work hard enough, put away 300, 400,000, S&P, whatever, when I was younger. I've done well for myself. But if I could do it different, I wouldn't have dealt with the house. I wouldn't have dealt with the headaches of that. I would have wasted my time working construction. I just would have went trucking. I would have bought me some cheap property. I would have invested years ago. And it would be a whole different game. I'm not complaining about my results. I've done pretty well for myself, considering. But the reason I did so well overall, just to be real about it, is because I didn't have rent. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a wife slowing me down. And that was by choice. Because I saw a lot of guys get screwed and divorced, and I said, you know what? Not me. I don't want to deal with that. But yeah, it's amazing when I drive around here and just look how much the culture of, living of van life, street parking. And I got to be honest, I'll finish it with this, because otherwise I'll go on and on. I've run into a lot of cases out there where you have rich van lifers. I saw this kid the other day, and he had a 1-ton jacked up Ford, and I was talking to him. And I'm like, no, man, there's this really cool spot out here and here. And I shouldn't waste my time telling people about any of these things. I'm like, but you got a van, it can go anywhere. I mean, go check it out. And you get that kind of, you're talking for a bit, and then they get that kind of they see your van, and they're like, they get that kind of look about them. And he was like, oh, I'm just working here, washing dishes. I'm like, yeah, I told him, I said, I wouldn't even bother with that. I'm like, I'm going to work. I'm going to drive truck and make my own money. We were talking. I could see that he was kind of a little off. He's like, well, I'm going to go back and chill a bit. I'm like, okay, you do whatever. And it's like, there is kind of an elitist mentality. I should talk about this another time. There is kind of an elite. There's a difference. And by the way, the cops treat you different if you've got a nice, you got a brand new RV, you got a brand new Sprinter van, or a really nice, like jacked up thing like that kid had. You get treated different by the police. You do. And, like a lot of these people that, they look down on old van people like me, like ratter vans. I don't know what to call it. My rat van. But they look down on, they'll look down on people like me. And it's funny because it's like, okay, well, you want to spend, $150,000 for your Sprinter Winnebago Travago. Okay, spend 150 grand for that. You're smart. I spent 700 for my van and I just built it myself. But it is what it is. It is kind of funny. And that's also, I got to be honest, my old van is part of the reason I can do so good bum and change. People see this van and they think poverty. And how much of life is really that illusion right there? The woman who smiles, who makes you think she loves you. The car that makes people think that you're successful. The entire world is bullshit and illusion. Perception. But anyways, I've rambled on for over 45 minutes, so hope you're all having a great day. If you want to like and subscribe. This YouTube thing's kind of a dying platform anyways, so I may or may not do this so often. I just figured I'd do it while I had decent data around. All right, so y'all take it easy. Peace.